Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 366. It is Tuesday, November 4th. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff, and it is election day. We've got a great show to dig into what is the most compelling story in the country and probably in the world. And the great John Opdycke is here, friend of the show, returning champion, true godfather of reform and open primaries. Before we get to that, the shutdown continues, not getting a lot of attention in most places. Former Vice President and Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney has died at age 84. Laura Loomer, the radical conspiracy theorist and extremist, now has a Pentagon press pass. But most of all, today is election day. So happy election day, America. And that means now is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. And helping us stay vigilant today on this national holiday of civics and frustration and elation and bureaucracy is a returning champion, a man that I consider a mentor, a dear friend, a partner in the movement to empower independence, somebody who's been kind of like a pillar of this show for 5 years and all the work we've been trying to do to reform our democracy and our elections for this country. One of the smartest guys, and I think the person we have to talk to on this election day, the great and powerful John Opdycke is back on Independent Americans. Welcome back, my friend.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you for all the kind words. And, you know, I'm an avid listener to your show, and it's been a real pleasure to watch you grow, to watch you become a real voice for independent thinking, independent action, independent candidates. So really keep it up. It's great.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. We're excited to be going daily. I've told you for a couple of years, once I get going daily, I want to have you on regularly to help us look under the hood of this machine that is our democracy and our elections in all its glory and in all its frustration. And we're daily now, folks. A reminder, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're listening or watching. If you haven't been watching, go to YouTube. Chris is doing a fantastic job of producing this show, and you can get a better look at these conversations we're having, including with the great John Opdycke. So, John, before we get into all of the election madness and importance, the question I ask everybody on this election day, where are you, my friend, and how are you?
I'm in my home office in Chicago, Illinois. I moved here a year and a half ago from New York City, and it's been great. Love it in Chicago. I'm a block from the lake and world-class bird sanctuary where I took my dog this morning. I'm doing well. There's a lot of action in the independent political arena, good, bad, and ugly, but there's a lot of action. And I like that. I've been around in this arena for 35 years, and there's been ebbs and flows and ups and downs. And I think right now it's a really interesting moment for the independent political space.
I am excited to dig into that. You and your team have been rocking and doing some really, really important work and scoring some wins, which I think is really important. But before we get into the top topic, your dog, what kind of dog is it? And what's your dog's name?
His name is Jojo. He is a pit beagle mix. And as I like to say, he's absolutely untrainable. He doesn't listen to anything that anybody says, and he's incredibly well behaved. So he's kind of the perfect dog.
Maybe a typical candidate too, right?
Exactly.
In an environment like this, he would definitely be more popular than most candidates we're faced with.
Right,
today.
Jojo for controller. He won't listen to you. He won't listen to you, but he'll do a good job.
I feel like most of the electeds don't listen to me. Today, I took my son to vote, and we're going to talk about that. But there's a city councilman, Chris Marte, who I voted against because I told my son, he doesn't listen to me. He hasn't gotten back to me. I asked him to get us a crossing guard and to help us push back on some changes to our local parks. I asked him to help with the helicopter ban. It was an important lesson for my son. I said, this guy didn't listen to us. This guy didn't listen to us, so I'm voting for the other person.
There you go.
Because she's not him, which is how some people feel on a day like today, right?
Absolutely. I mean, voting against Voting against is as much a right and an activity as voting for. Some people have attitudes about it. I don't. I think that we Americans get to use our vote however we see fit.
And it's about accountability, right? I mean, I've been playing the Willie Nelson song, Vote 'em Out, Vote 'em All Out today, just as a reminder to be skeptical, but also to be involved. And for me, whatever motivates you to get to the polls is a good thing for our democracy, especially when we've got such low participation rates relative to other countries. But let's get into it, John. The number one topic, our top topic today. If you're not angry and you're not excited, you're not paying attention. Today's top topic has got to be Election Day 2025. So, John, Election Day is today, and I think our elections are totally broken. That's my headline today, that I want people to understand why in many places today doesn't matter. Like the system has been rigged. Many folks have been looking away while parties have been corrupting our democracy and our primaries, especially. Today is a day when a lot of folks just still won't vote because they feel like it doesn't matter. And I think importantly, one thing I want to get into with you today, the narrative in this country is being driven and guided by the same partisan interests that have rigged this system. So tonight I'm going to go on News Nation for 2 hours. But I might be one of the only independents. Like everybody else is either a Democrat or a Republican. And I think the biggest story in America is the power of independence. I think we're going to determine so many elections across the country this year, especially at the local level and especially where the playing fields are fair. There are more and more independent candidates that are running. At IVA, we've endorsed 4 of them locally, but there are others. And next year, to your point earlier about the kind of momentum, I think next year is looking really exciting, not just for reform, but for candidates. And I think it's like a 2-pronged strategy. We've got to reform the broken system. We've got to push for open primaries. We also need better candidates, independent candidates, corrupted candidates, authentic candidates. And you've been at the forefront of all of that for decades. When I say you're the godfather of this movement, I really mean it. I think it's really important for folks to know that I don't think there's anybody who's more knowledgeable about the current state of affairs, especially impacting independents and unaffiliateds, than you. But let's start it off, John, by talking about today. Is today entirely broken? Or what's your assessment of national elections in 2025?
Well, I think there's some interesting stories. I think you're 100% right. Independents are going to determine the outcome in Virginia, in New Jersey, in California, where this referendum is on the ballot to get rid of gerrymandering. There's not a huge amount of races, so it's not a midterm year. But I think at the same time as independent voters are going to determine the outcome, the partisans are going to determine the narrative. This is going to be totally determined. This will be interpreted as the Democrats kind of what is the kind of the push? Are they moving to the center or are they going more towards socialism? That will be the narrative there. On the Republican side, it'll be more like, are the voters repudiating some of Trump's outrageous moves, or is he consolidating his power? It's one of the paradoxes that we independents are in, and we have to get creative with how to get out of this. I've said this on this show before. We have the numbers, we have the clout, but we don't have the narrative. Things that we do get fed into these partisan messaging machines. So I guarantee you the day after the election tomorrow, all the spin will be about, what does this mean for Trump? What does this mean for the Democratic Party? What does this mean for the big shots? And us voters will get left out of the story. Not entirely, but to a large extent. And that's where we are I like to say, we're kind of a movement that hasn't yet had our bar mitzvah. We haven't yet quite gotten our sea legs, but that doesn't deny the fact that we're hugely influential and we're going to determine who wins these races, the small number that there are.
John, I want to dig deeper into Prop 50. Later in the show, we're going to talk about what my friend Wes Moore just did in Maryland that's going to piss me off as an independent. Here in New York, there are 1 million independents, roughly. You guys have been focused all across the country. This is one place where you've raised the issue that there are 1 million independents who couldn't vote in the primary that determined Mamdani as the nominee, and in the past has been kind of like the censure. Usually it's over by the primary. but that's not the case now. Let me ask you if you can take a step back, and maybe I'll ask you this each time you come on the show. As an expert, can you please define what are independents and how many of them? What does it look like? Where do you see the trend lines? You say we have the numbers. Can you talk about where the numbers are right now?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the latest Gallup poll came out. 47% of Americans identify as independent. And that number has been on a steady uptick, both in terms of identifying, but also how people register to vote. There's 30 states that when you register to vote, you have to check a box: Democrat, Republican, independent, or sometimes there'll be various third parties: Libertarian, Green, Forward, other third parties. The numbers are on the uptick. I think, though, that there is two things that we have to challenge. One is that the official political science punditry world has the audacity, the balls to say, yeah, independents might be 47%, but they're not really independent. Because if we ask them a follow-up question, do you lean Democrat or do you lean Republican? People are polite. They'll answer the question. And then they say, well, you're not really an independent. You're a Democrat leaner or you're a Republican leaner. And that number of 47% goes down to 6% and poof, independents disappear. It's like Harry Houdini would be proud of the misdirection. The other mistake that people make. So that's one, which is this kind of like establishment insistence that we don't even exist. But the other thing is that people sometimes want to relate to independence as an ideological category, meaning the Democrats are too far left, the Republicans are too far right, independents are commonsensical people in the middle. And I understand the seduction of that, but it is 100% completely and utterly wrong. Independence is not an ideological category. There are conservative independents, liberal independents, socialist independents, libertarian independents. People have attitudes, viewpoints, positions, both on the spectrum, but also within themselves. Independence is an attitude, not an ideology. It is an attitude about the state of two-party America, about a political culture and political apparatus that reduces every single issue to the binary, red versus blue, black versus white, where everything is just A or B. People are bucking against that. Independents are people that want honesty, they want effectiveness, they want cooperation, and they come at that from all kinds of places on the ideological map. But they have an attitude. They don't like the current setup. And I think that if we can harness that, that's when we're going to start making serious waves in this country.
I think that is so important. I think that gets lost. I've learned that from you. You've helped me explain this to people, and you've fed me facts and figures and history and actions. When you say independent is an attitude, I mean, that's the t-shirt, man. I mean, that's exactly what I know to be true, and I see and I feel. I often say to people, they're not necessarily middle or neutral. They're giving a middle finger to all of it, right? They're saying, I reject the entire construct. I don't want Coke or Pepsi. I don't want soda at all. I want iced tea. I want water. I want something totally different. And I reject that premise. And to your point, that question is always asked about how they identify and sometimes how they vote, but fails to recognize that too often they don't have an option to vote in the primaries. They can't vote themselves. And then when they do, they don't have an independent candidate, right? So can you talk to us about you lead Open Primaries, one of the most, I think, important and effective organizations in America. If you care about democracy, you have to care about our primaries. Can you talk about where you and this movement are on the fight for open primaries? What's the scoreboard look like? What are the key battlefields now, and what's next?
Yeah, it's an emerging, very fluid playbook. I mean, there is a campaign petitioning right now. It just launched on Wednesday in Oklahoma to put open primaries on the ballot. We have a dream team of leadership there. Democrats, Republicans, and independents have come together to make this happen. There's an emerging effort in Oregon. There's legislation in Pennsylvania, and knock wood, hopefully very soon in Maryland. There's litigation happening in Pennsylvania and Maryland to challenge the fact that the primaries are funded by the public, but the parties get to determine who gets to vote in them. So they're publicly funded, privately controlled. And we're trying to dismantle that in Wyoming, in Oregon, in Maryland. There's also defense. The Republican Party of Texas just filed a federal lawsuit to close the primaries in Texas. They have an open system there right now. So there's a lot of back and forth litigation, legislation, ballot referendums, public education efforts. And you know, it's 15 years ago when I formed Open Primaries. People that were active in political reform would literally say to me, why are you doing this? This is not even a relevant issue. The real issue is campaign finance reform. The real issue is gerrymandering. The real issue, and I agree with all that. But this issue of how the primaries are run was completely illegitimate 15 years ago. Completely. There were just tiny little pockets of activism on it around the country. It's now a national conversation. And one of the reasons is there's been more and more scholarship that shows that at the congressional level, midterms next year, there's 435 members of Congress that are going to run. 100 of them will be elected in the primaries. 35 of them will be elected in the general election. 10-to-1 ratio.
35 out of 400 will be competitive.
35 out of 435 will have some kind of competitive November election. For the others, they're safe blue or safe red. There's a primary. Whoever wins the primary in the dominant party can take a vacation, go to the Dominican Republic, have a Mai Tai. They don't have to campaign. They don't have to talk to the voters. So if you're an independent in one of these districts, which again is 90% of the country, no one talks to you during the primary because you can't vote. And no one talks to you in the general election because there's not a competition. And this has become, 25, 30 years ago, it wasn't like that. 1 out of every 3, 2 out of every 3 races were, competitive and voters had a choice. They don't have a choice anymore. And so that's helping to elevate the recognition that not only do we have to open the primaries, let me make things harder for you, Paul. All right. Opening the primaries is really, really hard. Giving independent voters full access is hard, but it's only step 1. Step 2 is all of us Americans have been brainwashed into thinking that the activists vote in the primaries. I'm a normal person. I vote in November. We've all been that you get fed that in grade school. The loonies vote in the primary. The regular people vote in November. And we have to change that mindset. We have to educate the American people that if you want power, you want a voice, you got to vote in the primary and you got to vote in the general election. And that's more than changing the law. In some ways, changing the law is very hard, but it's almost easy compared to changing the culture. But we do have to change the culture.
Folks, if you're new to the show, welcome to the seminar, the class with Professor Opdycke. Class is in session. This is exactly why I speak to him so frequently, and I'm grateful.
I barely graduated college, Paul, so don't call me the professor, okay?
Some of us are late bloomers. That's okay. I mean, you also barely graduated from Michigan, where you also played soccer and did a lot of other things. So that probably helped you in other ways. But let me ask you a specific question. So I think it's important in the framework of understanding that independents, unaffiliated voters do not have equal rights to other people in this country, essentially, right? They don't have equal access to publicly funded elections. I always use myself as an example. I'm an Iraq war veteran. I'm a 9/11 first responder. I'm a Little League coach. I'm involved in my community. And when the primaries were happening in June, my son and I walked to his public school where public funds were being used to run a private election. And he said to me, "Dad, aren't you going to vote today?" And I said, "Son, I can't vote today." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm not a Democrat or a Republican." And that, I think, clarifies it. But interestingly, maybe a story beneath the story is there was an initiative here in New York City, because New York City is so visible, to have open primaries on the ballot this November, today, right? That was gaining momentum. It was seen to be getting some traction. Then Mamdani and Lander and the far left win the Democratic primary and I think killed it. They have effectively gamed or worked the Democratic primary. They have succeeded. They've knocked out the moderates. They knocked out Cuomo. They knocked out Adams. They don't want that to go away. They want to keep that in place so they can continue to do that. That's my assessment. But most importantly, There was a world where we could have had open primaries on the ballot for New York City today, but that is gone. Can you talk about that situation and if there are others where we've lost and why did we lose?
Yeah, and I might disappoint you here a bit, Paul, because I try to actually complicate the situation, not make it easy. All right. So if you want to edit this out, be my guest. But here's how I see it. I think that New York City has had a closed system forever. And one of the consequences of that is that year in and year out, voter turnout goes down and down. In 1950, 86% of people voted in New York City elections. Okay. Now it's handfuls of people, 10%, 12%, 15%. It's negligible. But one of the things that happens when turnout becomes so small is that well-organized groups and candidates can do very well. They didn't cause the problem. Mamdani did not cause this problem. Now, I don't find him an attractive candidate, but the DSA, the Working Families Party, Mamdani, they went out there year in and year out and they knocked on doors. What did the moderates do? What did the centrists do? Nothing. They just say, hey, we control New York. This is our town. And they got their ass kicked. Now, I'm not saying that cynically. I'm just saying that sometimes people want to look at this as if this problem just emerged. It's been building for decades, that people have been systematically excluded and shut out. And then Mamdani got 10%. And that was a high point. That was like higher voter turnout than in decades. So I think the pressure is building for an open system. Let the independents in. But I'll be the first one to say that if we get open primaries in New York City, if people think that's going to be a light switch and all of a sudden New York is going to, no, people have been systematically shut out for decades. And to rebuild that is going to require significant investment in the way that the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, Working Families Party, the left, they made investments. They put in time, they put in money, they knocked on the damn doors. And I will never disrespect them for that, even if I disagree with what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. We don't disagree. I mean, I respect the game, right? Like they knew the rules, they played the game, they won, but now they get to also determine whether or not we play again. And if the rules are different, I think you've said it before. Imagine a game where one team is also, or both teams are also the referees. I don't know how you've explained it, right? But they're controlling the conditions, and we can't even get on the field. Right. I mean, and that's the challenge now. And on the right, similarly, you've got Trump and the MAGA base that's been well organized, it turns out, especially when he's on the ticket. And I think that has been underestimated by the other side and by the middle. But let's go to another real world today situation. Prop 50 is happening in California right now. Governor Gavin Newsom wants to redraw the congressional districts. And I think he's been overt about this in an effort to offset Republican congressional power in Washington. He is not saying, I don't think he's saying, we want our districts to be more representative, more fair for everyone. I think the implied or the overt statement is they want more Democratic seats, and they want that as a counterbalance to Trump. I think it would be different if they came out and said, we want to redraw the districts to include everyone, and we'll see where the chips fall where they may, and it may help independents and help everyone. But that's not the case here. I mean, Newsom wants to be the backstop against Trump. And we're going to talk about it later in the show. But now Governor Wes Moore today on Election Day announced he's going to do the same thing in Maryland. But can you break down for us, what do you think is most important about Prop 50, which seems to be popular, right? I've spoken to folks over there. They say it's popular. It's likely to pass. I asked them, where do independents fall? They didn't have a lot of information about that, unsurprisingly. But what should folks know about Prop 50?
Well, by the time this airs, we'll probably know what happened. But I think there's three things that are of interest to me. One is Newsom rewrites history. He makes it sound like the Democrats enacted a fair system. They didn't. The people did. They passed it via referendum both in 2010 and 2012 for state and for federal. The Democratic Party opposed it. Nancy Pelosi opposed it. The people of California said, we don't want politicians drawing our lines. And Governor Schwarzenegger and Charlie Munger deserve a huge amount of credit for that, and the people of California. So Newsom is saying, hey, we Democrats did this. Now we just want to put it on pause for 6 years. So he's rewriting history. I think that what Trump is doing in Texas and other states, he started the fight. I understand voters who say, look, I don't like this, but we have to fight fire with fire. I disagree with it, but I understand it. And I think in the absence of any real Democratic leadership giving people a different way to think, and the fact that independents are not yet an organized force, people are vulnerable to that. The final point is that, and I've talked to some prominent Democrats about this, and they all just laughed me out of the room. But I think the Democrats missed a massive opportunity when Trump and Abbott did this mid-decade gerrymander. Because what Newsom did is say, oh, okay, you're going to do that. We're going to do tit for tat. Imagine if the Democrats had responded and said, of course he has to cheat. Of course he has to rig the rules because he's unpopular and what he's doing on a whole set of issues is unpopular. We Democrats are not going to cheat. We're not going to bend the rules. In fact, we're going to stop gerrymandering in the states we control, like Illinois and New York. We're going to present a positive vision to the American people in 2026 and let the chips fall where they may. But they can't make that statement because they don't have a positive vision for the country. So they're in a bind. They have to respond to cheating with cheating. And if they had a vision, they could respond to cheating with a vision, but they don't. And that's kind of a pickle that we're in.
I think this is really important because it's a reflection of how extreme the parties have gotten, how out of connection with the center they've been. Even when they say about gerrymandering, you don't hear them say, we want to make it more fair for independents and for people who are unaffiliated and for people who are blocked out. It's literally what you said, fighting fire with fire, cheating so cheaters can be offset. And I think it's really, really dangerous to our democracy and is now gonna it can get you, it'll play well with the base, right? Democrats will love it. Democrats in California will love it, and it will kind of perpetuate the balkanization of our politics, where Alabama's all red and California's all blue, and many of us are homeless. So, John, let me ask you, maybe to kind of wrap this segment up here, candidates, right? We've had Jim Walden on this. Jim's on the ballot today in New York City, which I think was actually a pretty historic thing. Then he dropped out in the summer and wanted to come off the ballot, but they wouldn't let him off the ballot in a way that I think underscores how broken it was. But the fact that he's there, I think, gives us hope because you can see that an independent can make it. Andrew Cuomo is actually running as an independent, which is not what we want, but I think significant. Can you talk about where the state of affairs are for independent candidates? You an advisor to IBA and the work we're doing there. We're trying to remove those barriers. We're trying to find candidates and support them. But what does the landscape look like for independent candidates at a moment where I think we are ripe for, kind of our charismatic Mamdani, right? Dan Osborne caught fire, maybe is the closest real thing we've seen. But how would you assess the state of affairs for candidates, and what can folks look to for hope as we go into 26?
I think there's been a real uptick, and you've played a key role in this, Paul, but it's not just you. There are various organizations, the Independent Center, as you say, Dan Osborne, United Americans, United Independents, Independent Veterans of Americans that are recruiting candidates and they're running, and particularly given that the Democrats don't run candidates in like 3/4 of the districts in red states. There's massive opportunities and people are starting to do this. The Forward Party is starting to do this directly, is to recruit candidates in districts where there will be only one candidate on the ballot, where one party or the other doesn't run candidates. And these head-to-heads are opportunities for voters to vote independent and get, either elect that person or get a sizable vote. I think the one thing that I would caution us is that one of the features of being a candidate for office is it's almost a requirement that you have to communicate in everything, I'm going to win. And look, there are circumstances like Dan Osborne where as an independent first getting in, you actually have a shot to win. And that I don't want to ever say that will never happen. But for the vast majority of independent candidates, getting 10% of the vote is a massive, massive victory. And I think sometimes independent candidates, they go out there, they work their ass off, and they get 10% of the vote, and they throw up their hands, and you never hear from them again. When in fact, they've just gotten 10% of the people to live in that district. And the question is, how do I continue to build with those people so that the next time I run or someone else runs, it's 20%, it's 25, it's 30. How do you build? Because people, candidates in particular, they underestimate the ways in which the Democrats and Republicans have rigged the game. They've rigged it psychologically. They've rigged it legally. They've rigged it administratively. They've rigged it. I mean, look at your ballot in New York. The independent candidates are on the far right of the ballot. They're in Siberia. You know, Sliwa and Mandami are right there, A and B, and the other and people think like, oh, I'm just going to overcome that. No, you're not. The game is rigged. And I'm not saying that we should be cynical. I'm saying when you enter into a rigged game, you got to go in there trying to win, but saying, what am I going to take out of this to build with so we can unrig this in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? And I think there's more and more candidates that have that perspective, but not yet enough. We haven't crossed the tipping point yet.
I think that's so important because you and I have talked strategy a lot, you know, in public and in private. And I actually sent a note to Jim Walden today, and I said, no, today is a tough day, but you should be really proud of the fact that I know it may be weird, but your name is on the ballot. You got there, right? You qualified for the debates. He got $3 million in matching funds. He's not the guy, but he may open the path for the guy or the gal that comes, right? And that's what movements are all about. It's kind of like waves, successions of waves. And we're also putting forward, especially with IBA, what I would call workhorses and show horses. There are some that we know are going to be losers, but they're challenging the narrative. They're captivating media. They're inspiring other people. They're raising money. And those folks are important. And then you've got the workhorses, the ones that might have been Democrats or Republicans last time, that might be more competitive, that might be older. They may not be perfect. But I think in this wave, especially in 26, we've got an opportunity for breakouts, right? Especially in the Senate, maybe for governors, definitely for mayors, as we think about Mayor Tim Kelly in Chattanooga. We think about Mayor Yemi Mobolade in Colorado Springs, folks who've been on this show before, and I hope will come back. John, I could talk to you about this for hours, but I want to get to the final parts of our show.
Sure.
And I want to invite you to come back often. I want to do this often for an assessment of where we are. But before we do that, let's go to a topic that is election day specific, that is below the radar. Now, John, this is in your wheelhouse too. I was disappointed to see today that my friend, Democrat Governor Wes Moore, now wants to redistrict his state. He's doing a Gavin Newsom, and today he announced he's launching a Maryland redistricting commission after top state Democrats tried to stop this effort. There's only one Republican out of 8 in the House from Maryland anyway, and the commission is going to be chaired by Maryland Democratic Senator Angela Ashbrooks, an ally of Moore's who he helped get elected. Now, there's going to be other folks, including Brian Frosh, the state's Democratic Attorney General, who served under Larry Hogan, the Republican, and Ray Morris, the nonpartisan mayor from the city of Cumberland. And also, there's a quote here from Ferguson, who's also on the group that I want to mention. He said he's open to Marylanders hearing opposing concerns, and that following through on a redistricting plan could backfire on Democrats and unintentionally give Donald Trump 1 or 2 additional congressional seats. So, you know, it seems like now it's worked for Newsom. I would expect any Democrat that wants the nomination for president that's a governor to try to do the same. If Pritzker hasn't done it, he'll probably do the same. If Hochul has presidential aspirations of anyone else. What is your, I'm just going to say, I'm thumbs down on this, okay? Unless it's truly bipartisan where you have an opportunity to put a Republican and Democrat together on the top of it, or even an independent person like John Opdycke, right? If you wanted a truly independent redistricting commission, I would have picked you instead of a Democrat or Republican. I'm pissed off about it, John, and I love Wes, and I'm rooting for Wes always. But this is where he's showing his partisan loyalties, right? And his partisan streaks. And I don't think that's unusual, unfortunately, in this environment. But I hope he comes on the show to talk about it. But this is below the radar, John. What's your take on what's happening in Maryland, where simultaneously you and I and others have been pushing for open primaries
Yep.
and have gotten resistance from
Yep.
the establishment?
Well, yeah, I like Wes. I think he's a good governor. I see him in action, and he's got mojo, and he's out there doing the right thing for the people of Maryland. I think that this is a massive mistake on his part. It's going to basically, I think, tarnish him and say to the people, look, he's a good governor. He works hard, but at the end of the day, he cares more about the Democratic Party than he does about the people of the state. And he's more interested in national advancement than in being a good governor. And that pressure is on every single governor, member of Congress, senator. I mean, the pressure is intense. So he's not alone. I think he made a bad choice. But let me give you a little silver lining, Paul, while we're at this. One of the things that Moore said is we're going to have public hearings. We're going to open this up. And I'll tell you, I'll announce it right here, even though I just heard about this today. Open primaries and our local partners are going to mobilize hundreds of independent voters to go to those hearings and say, not only do I think this, this type of partisan gerrymandering is immoral and excludes us independents, it really has nothing to do with any voter. It excludes everybody. Let's be honest about that. But we want to vote in these primaries, and we want to know how come we can't vote in these elections. Well, there's 1 million of us. These are taxpayer funded. And if you succeed at gerrymandering, the primary is the only election that counts. So if you're going to gerrymander, what are you going to do about us independents? And we're going to get that out there. And we're going to force it more, and the commission and every politician in Maryland to have to address, just like we did in New York, address the fact that there are 1 million people that cannot vote. What are you going to do about that? And that's where, in some ways, to make a bigger point, Paul, I think where we are as an independent movement is that we're not quite at the place where we can dictate what's going to happen, where we can make sure this doesn't, we have to live with the consequences of this partisan fight between Democrats and Republicans. We're not big enough to change it, but we are strong enough to put pressure, to start putting some pressure from the bottom up on these partisan players in their endless warfare, and see where that takes us. See if we can use that pressure to take us into some new positions. And that's what I'm going to be doing with this thing in Maryland.
I love it. Go, John. Go. I volunteer for tribute. I volunteer to help in Maryland in any way I can. I'm not from there, but I care about it. And we've got lots of listeners, lots of voters, lots of folks who are in our networks that care. Friends can respectfully disagree. And Wes is a very dear friend of mine, but I'm with you. I think this is the wrong call for Maryland and for America. I hope he'll reconsider. And if he won't, we will do what he and others have done for decades. We'll bring pressure. We'll bring activism. We'll fight the good fight, and we'll try to stop it. And if we lose, we'll come back even harder next time. But I think this is a really important story that's below the radar. So thanks for jumping in. Folks, keep an eye on this issue. Keep an eye on John Opdycke. Don't let it fall below the radar. All right, John, we're going to shift to the end of our show. Election day is intense. This conversation has been fantastic. This is kind of what Independent Americans is really all about. But we all need to take a step back on Election Day, and we're going to get to something good.
Something good, oh, something sweet. Feel the fire, feel the
And on this Election Day, my something good is pretty simple. Voting. It's not ideal. It can be frustrating. It is annoying to see limited options, but the power of voting and the fact that we can still do it safely and we can do it generally without reservation in this country is something that should be celebrated. And I don't like my options, but I always appreciate, respect, and exercise the right that I have, that so many fought and died for and to protect. And so that's what my grandparents taught me. That's my World War II grandfather and grandmother who worked the polls taught me. And I did something that I always do. I took the kids. I took my son today because I think there's no finer teaching moment. I pulled him out of school. We went downstairs in his school that had been commandeered by the election in their gym, and we voted. And we talked about the ballots initiatives, which are really interesting. For example, there's one that would align our elections with presidential elections. There's another one to allow development on federal land. And these are the things we talk through. So he understands the consequences. And then he filled out the bubbles and he got a great sticker that he wore with pride. And I posted this earlier. And I think, the future is uncertain, but my kids won't be. They're going to know what they're doing. They're going to know how to vote. They're going to encourage their friends to vote. They're going to understand the power of voting, and they're going to work to change it. And I just want to give a shout out, especially to the patient poll workers, cops, teachers, everyone else that makes today possible and safe around the country, and for showing our kids, especially, the power of what is still uniquely possible in America. So my something good today is voting. It ain't perfect, but it's still good. John, over to you, my friend. What do you got today? What's something good?
A friend of mine, I play soccer every Thursday nights in an old man's league. We get out there and we hustle around and we have fun. And the guy who's the organizer of it is a public school teacher. And he sent me a letter that he found in his attic from decades ago, where his class wrote letters to famous authors asking for advice and ideas, and only one wrote them back. And it was Kurt Vonnegut. And he said, I'm going to just read one sentence from this letter that my friend got from Kurt Vonnegut decades ago. Seriously, I mean, starting right now, do art and do it for the rest of your lives. Draw a funny picture, dance home after school, sing in the shower, and on and on and on. Not to get money and fame, but to experience becoming. And I think I read this letter and I literally got tears in my eyes, because I think a lot of the work that I do at Open Primaries and me and my colleagues do is to support independents to become, to have that experience in this partisan MMA match, right? Of doing something modest, small, seemingly irrelevant, that helps you establish your voice as a citizen, as an American, as an independent. And that letter made me think about the thousands of independents around the country that are doing these little tiny things that no one ever hears about, but they're doing them, and that's contributing to the growth of our movement. So thank you, Kurt Vonnegut.
That is real good. All of that was real good. That is definitely something good. And my friend John Opdycke, you are something good. You are something special. You are a teacher. You are an organizer. You are a fighter. And you're one of the finest patriots I know. Every day for decades, you've been doing those little things. You've been living in that spirit of Kurt Vonnegut, and you've been bringing your own passion and creativity to it. You've put together a great team. Shout out to Jeremy and everybody else that works alongside of you. You guys are just every day, you're banging away at the change that is needed in a very selfless way. Leadership is often about sacrifice. It's not about glory. And that's true leadership. And I think you're one of the finest leaders that I know. And I'm just
thanks,
honored
Paul,
to have you on the program and grateful to have you on the show, my friend.
I appreciate that. And basically, you can book me whenever you want.
I'm going to take you up on that. I'm going to give you a spot here too. Where can folks find out more about Open Primaries, and what should they do to help?
Go to letusvote.org or go to openprimaries.org, or go to both and sign up. Get our weekly newsletter. It's fantastic. It'll give you everything you need to know about what's happening. And then we'll plug you into state campaigns, initiatives. We do this wonderful spokesperson training program, which I know a whole bunch of IVA people are participating in January, where we train independents who want to run for office, who want to build organizations, and how to do that. So go to letusvote.org or openprimaries.org, sign up, and there's a million ways you can get involved in your community.
Do it, folks. Do it. Be a part of the movement. John is fearlessly leading it, and he's giving you a lot of good ways to get involved. My friend, thank you for joining us today and for all you do, and happy election day to you, man.
You too, Paul.
Folks, we are daily now. Every day, we're going to keep bringing the fire. We're going to talk about the independent movement. We're going to bring an independent voice and perspective that you won't get anywhere else. So subscribe, share, spread the news far and wide. I think this episode, this Election Day special, underscores why this kind of media is important, why independent media is so important. Upcoming media hits tonight. I will be on News Nation from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. with Connell McShane, breaking down the results and asking why the hell more people aren't focused on independence. Tomorrow, I'll be again on News Nation for my regular segment with Connell at 3. and on MSNBC, Deadline White House, usually in the 4 or 5 hour, and then again on MSNBC Thursday. Great guests coming up this week. We're going to do an election recap tomorrow. I'll give you a surprise guest on that one coming up. Jim Vanderhey, the founder and CEO of Axios Media, will be with us on Thursday. Joy Taylor is back on Friday for sports, culture, and more in Football Friday. Next week is Veterans Week. Veterans Week, we're going to have General Mark Hertling will be joining us. Henry Rollins is coming back. For all of you longtime listeners and viewers, maybe next week, maybe sometime soon, Henry Rollins is coming, folks. You don't want to miss that, and lots of other great guests. So subscribe, go to independentamericans.us, get the merch, rock the merch next time you go to the polls or on your Thanksgiving, because today on Election Day shows that our future is full of and driven by independents, because independents are the future. And no, you're not alone in your independence. America might be divided, but we at Independent Americans are trying to change that every day, adding light to contrast the heat of all the other political shows and nonsense. So if you're among the now almost 50% of Americans who are independent, this is your show. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, but you're not a die-hard partisan, if you're independent curious, this is your show, this is your movement, and all are welcome. We invite you to be a part of the solution and join this independent movement, because our independent movement is the hope for the future. Country over party, people over politics, light over heat and hate, busting up the status quo and fueling our new movement, which you can see is growing. You see it today, and next year will really show the world. If you enjoyed this episode, share it far and wide, and invite others to declare their independence, especially on this election day. And stay vigilant, my friends, because eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And hope is the oxygen of democracy, and it'll keep you vigilant. No, you're not alone in your vigilance. We're all vigilant, and we're all in this together, especially today. Stay vigilant, America. Thank you to my friend John Opdycke, and happy Election Day. Now, if you haven't already, get out and vote. If the polls are still open, get out and vote and show that vigilance. I'll see you tomorrow.
Powered by Righteous Media.